Alright, what's going on, guys? We have some pretty insane news to talk about today. This is just breaking at the time of me recording this, but FromSoftware is about to undergo one of the biggest changes a studio can make, and it seems, pretty reliably, that Sony is about to buy out Hidetaka, which means that FromSoftware is about to be owned almost exclusively by Sony. Now we have a lot to break down here and a ton to talk about, so I'm not going to edit much in this video. I doubt you guys care about the footage in the background that much anyway, but we gotta talk about this news, man. So as always, if you want to stay up to date on all things FromSoftware, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's break this down. Very early this morning, a report came out from Reuters claiming that Sony is going to buy Hidetaka. Exclusive, Sony is in talks to buy media powerhouse behind Elden Ring. Now, for those of you that are unaware, let me break down exactly what's happening here. Hidetaka is a massive Japanese media company, which covers a ton of media types such as anime, magazines, books, manga, movies, and of course video games. And their #1 company under their umbrella that makes video games is FromSoftware. And ever since Elden Ring's release, FromSoftware has been their cash cow, with their games swaying the entire corporation's income to almost never before seen profits. But let's continue reading. New York, Tokyo, November 19th, Sony in talks to acquire Hidetaka, the Japanese media powerhouse behind the Elden Ring game. Two sources familiar with the matter said, as the technology giant looks to add to its entertainment portfolio. The talks between the two sides are ongoing, and if successful, a deal could be signed in the coming weeks, the sources said. Hidetaka's shares closed up 23% at their daily limit. Its market capitalization was around $2.7 billion prior to the Reuters report. Sony shares close up 0.6%. Wow, that is some insane news. And that has a lot of implications for FromSoftware. Now, to begin here, it's important to clarify that Sony already owns a portion of FromSoftware. And we covered this a few years ago, back when Hidetaka sold a portion of FromSoftware to Sony. I believe it was around 13%, with the Chinese company Tencent owning an equal share and Hidetaka keeping the majority stake. At that time, with only about 13 to 15% of FromSoftware's stake, they didn't have enough power to make any major decisions for FromSoftware. They could of course offer suggestions and have negotiating power, but without being the majority stakeholder, you can't really tell them what to do. If this deal were to close, that would make Sony the majority stakeholder at 87%, and in turn FromSoftware would be beholden to them. Part of the reason FromSoftware has been so successful over the past few years is because, at least from the outside looking in, it seems that Hidetaka has taken a very hands-off approach, really letting FromSoftware and Bandai do their own thing. They didn't force Elden Ring DLC to come out any sooner. They didn't stop them from making Armored Core, even though they knew it would sell significantly less. It seems, and of course I'm not in those back rooms to hear, that they've been allowed to lead with passion instead of finances. But what about Sony in this case? Well, if the deal goes through, it doesn't necessarily mean that Sony is going to make any major changes. It's entirely possible that Sony does exactly what Hidetaka has done and let them do their own thing, do what they want, make the games they want, and therefore be successful in that regard. But what does frighten me a bit in this case is Sony's track record when it comes to video games and their own IP, especially after this year's Concord disaster. Now, I'm sure you all are very well aware of the situation surrounding this game. This was supposed to be Sony's next big thing, an Overwatch clone with characters seeped in modern political takes that was going to be an ongoing live service game at the head of PlayStation. And Sony invested $400 million into this game, only for it to get scrapped after they realized nobody was going to play it. It was one of the worst gaming decisions in gaming history, and unfortunately that's the track record we're going off right now, going into this news of them potentially buying FromSoftware. Now, of course, Sony has had more successes than losses. The majority of Sony IP have been major successes, and they're not exactly the ones making the games themselves. So a more realistic approach to this is that FromSoftware is generally going to be unaffected. However, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is FromSoftware and Sony's past relationship, centering around Bloodborne, because this does show a history of Sony not letting FromSoftware do what they want. Now, when Bloodborne was made, that was a joint partnership between FromSoftware and Sony, and it resulted in a phenomenal game. But since then, the IP of Bloodborne has essentially been held hostage by Sony, with everyone that has played the game begging for a remake or remaster, even FromSoftware themselves wanting to remake the game, but for whatever reason, Sony hasn't let them. But one way we could potentially look at this deal is that they may have been saving this project for this moment, waiting until they're the ones at the helm, with sway over the original creators, before a Bloodborne remake happens, which I do think could be a very considerable possibility. It is important though to keep in mind that Sony is not buying just FromSoftware, they're buying the entirety of Hidetaka, and that corporation spans a ton of media businesses. But FromSoftware is potentially the biggest cash cow in that portfolio, so they've likely been at the center of many of these talks. Sony has been very much expanding their hold on anime lately, and that right there is the primary driving factor behind this deal if I had to guess. But they know exactly what they're getting as a bonus with FromSoftware. So what do you think about Sony potentially buying Hidetaka? Do you think the deal is going to go through? And what do you think that'll mean for FromSoftware? Y'all let me know down below. In other news, we have a bit of leaks/rumors to discuss. Yesterday, a new rumor emerged about a potential Dark Souls 3 remastered. And this comes from the Xbox Era podcast, and I'll play you the clip here.
What the rumor I've heard, the info I was given, what a little birdie told me.
All
now,
that jazz.
a lot of people will probably file this under this was obvious. Whatever, sue me. What I have heard is that we are getting a Dark Souls 3 remaster.
Oh, From fans will be happy with that.
That's what I've heard that that's what we are getting. Just got the DM out of nowhere the other day.
So there you have it. Apparently, according to them, a Dark Souls 3 remaster is in the works. Here's the thing, this guy is apparently a pretty unreliable leaker, and I believe we here on the channel reported about a leak he had about a Bloodborne remaster several years ago, which of course did not happen. So take it with a grain of salt. It could be true, it might also not be true, but the thing is, I don't even think Dark Souls 3 needs one. The game looks and runs just fine on current gen consoles, and to be completely honest, it's at the bottom of my list of games I want a remaster for. At the very least, I would be very happy to get back into PvP in that game, but even so, I just don't think the game needs it yet. We can look at the years though and do some math. Dark Souls 3 is 8 years old, and both Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2 received their remasters in a shorter time span than that. So if it were to happen, I'd be happy, but I think the game's just fine as it is right now. We will see though. But y'all let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you want a Dark Souls 3 remaster? Do you think it needs one? And if it does come out, will you be excited for it? With all that though, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here, and I will catch you in the next one.